every level. And interestingly enough, at the time it was known as the Great War. And that's not the way I remember American soldiers describing it. But this was the war. Now, we refer to today as World War I, in part because no one knew there was going to be World War II. In fact, some of the phrases used, you might be familiar with: the war to end all wars, etc., etc. It fundamentally, from my perspective, transformed the nature of warfare. And with that came this new military technology that would be known as total war. It was not known as total war at the time. Many times people looking back, historians and others will name periods. You might be familiar with something called massive retaliation or mutual assured destruction. For those people of a certain age, you might be familiar with it. It's called World War II. In fact, I would argue necessarily that the 20th century is the age of total war. Now, for us today, our experiences generally have been an era of television wars. Vietnam was a television war. Today, the Gulf War, Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. Weaponry is quite limited. Swords, pikes, maces, axes, lances, bows and arrows. They're limited in terms of a couple things. One, they have to be controlled by an individual. They're limited in their destructive power. A bow and arrow, a sword, a pike. What is significant, however, technologically, is the formations they used. Begin to get our new changes in weaponry, muskets, cannons. And with that, they are directed not just at soldiers, but they're directed at the civilian population who live behind walls. If you've ever traveled in Europe at all, we don't see it in the United States, but in many societies you go to, you'll find the remnants of the walls around the city. Until about the 1500s and 1600s, most military forces are not standing professional armies. Historically, the United States has a history of not having standing professional armies. If you look at the size of the Army before the Civil War, before World War I, before World War II, we had to dramatically change the nature of American society to manifest or gather enough people together and fight that war. Since Vietnam, well, I'd say probably since Korea, Vietnam, and most wars, we've not seen the total mobilization that you saw in World War I or World War II. And if anything is a central factor in understanding total war, it's the total mobilization of society to wage a war, both at home and on the front lines. By the way, home front is a term that comes out of World War I. A number of factors that I would contend are elements that will be pieces that will of a puzzle that we will know as total war. One is the nature of these technological changes. From the sword to the bow and arrow, from the chariot, you get weapons, and you begin to get the use of chemical/mechanical power predominates. And so you get the portable musket. There were other muskets that weren't portable, but you get the portable musket and you get the cannon. And then you get the cannon put on a ship, which leads to incredible expansion. Nevertheless, by the time we get to roughly the 1700s, 1800s, we see enormous technological advantages, developments that contribute to the growth of something called the Standing National Army. This preceded the French Revolution. You could have armies of 400,000 to 500,000 soldiers. Over 5,000 years, the central form of economic production is agricultural production. Everything is made by hand. And so, for example, if you say it's the 30 Years' War, the 100 Years' War, the War of the Roses, there are enormously long periods of time between battles, because you have to build everything by hand. There's a famous battle in ancient Greece called the Battle of Salamis, in which they had to build 200 triremes, wooden ships by hand. The notion of national identity. Everyone here, generally, if they go anywhere, identifies outside the United States, will generally identify themselves as a Macomer, a Michiganian, or a what? American. For most people throughout, even in our own history, people had a regional or local identity. If I look at the names throughout history, the so-and-so of someplace. And the draft becomes, for me, one of the symbols of total war. Because now you reach down into society and says everybody between a certain age, whatever it might be, 18 to 30, 18 to whatever the case may be, you have to serve. And one of the ways it's rationalized it is through propaganda, and that the element of that is national spirit. One of the things that's fascinating about World War I is the total mobilization of societies. Each government had plans to mobilize into military. Some slowly, some quickly. So the notion of conscription becomes central. This is a great war. I'm going to achieve great glory. I mean, it was met with incredible enthusiasm, cheering, festivity, parades, flags, music, women, go, honey, go, go. When you look at the documentaries, you're just shocked by that. The absolute enthusiasm people express. Politicians, average citizens, going to World War I. This is in Europe. And so necessarily these components are crucial. But even in the case of broad popular support for the war, you still had to force people to go to war. When President Wilson, who pushed for neutrality, even though he knew that we were going to have to get involved in the war, he wanted volunteers at first. He didn't get enough. World War II, we still had to use conscription. Technological advances. 2, the emergence of the central nation state. 3, the notion of national identity. 4, and this becomes particularly important, the technological developments such as the ocean-going ship, the steam-powered ship, and the telegraph. Now, these are otherwise benign civilian technological advances that play a central role in total war. World War I is a global war. It's the first global war. And it's a global war because the Allies, more so than Germany, were imperial nations with colonies, and they had to bring supplies from those colonies to their country, England or France. They brought hundreds of thousands of people from the colonies to fight in the war. It is these European empires will compete over trade, armaments, colonies, and allies, creating an atmosphere of competition and conflict. And so the question became, literally, by the end of the 1800s and the early 1900s, not if we'd have a war, but when we would have the war. And when we did have the war, because of these technological advancements, and as a result of industrialization, the belief was, hey, we got this power, this technology, we'll be home by Christmas. Ability, particularly for militaries and political leaders, as well as business leaders, to respond more rapidly to changing circumstances. Events happen very quickly in Europe in June and July, and by August, World War I begins. And by World War I, they had already put plans in place using the trains for rapid mobilization. When you combine that with the fact that you can take factories and change them from making shirts and pants one day to making, and this is a place, Michigan is a place where you have Tank Alley down here, Willow Run. These were places in which you went one day from making consumer goods to making war items. So industrialization solves, though no one intended it, the fundamental problem that you don't have to stop fighting to replenish, logistics become central to total war. Without the ability to make lots of stuff quick, fast, cheap, you can't fight what becomes crucial to World War I. By roughly March of 1918, the Germans, in their attempt to break through, run out of soldiers to fight. Let me say that again. They run out of men of a certain age to fight. There were no more. I know of no other instance in human history where that's occurred. I know people describe battles as meat grinders, etc., etc. You have to understand, prior to World War I, the most technologically advanced, the most sophisticated, and perhaps the largest economy in Europe was Germany. They ran out of people to fight in 4 years. As a result of industrialization, World War I becomes the most technologically advanced war in human history. Aside from what is most people associate many times with World War I, poison gas, and that's only used briefly and has very limited effect, here are the technological advancements. Cars and trucks. If you look at the documentaries from this period, and the luxury we have because of cameras and films, you see lots of horses, but you also see lots of trucks. There are stories of soldiers sharpening their swords in the cavalry because they think they're going to fight. Okay. As is the case many times, technology kind of goes geometrically. Our social understanding of it is kind of arithmetic. And so necessarily from my perspective, that's to some degree what you're seeing in World War I. So what are the technological advances? Cars and trucks, flamethrowers, grenades, barbed wire, long-range artillery, submarines, zeppelins, airplanes. But the one that's most deadly is machine gun. Because here you see the, what I'll call the antiquated attitude towards war. This is how we fought the wars in the past. And therefore we're going to adjust it to the technology. When you have men in one trench, get up, over the top, carrying about 50, 60-pound packs, and running across a field after they're getting past about 30 yards of barbed wire, and then you're about to run through the mud, and then be mowed down by machine guns. In the event of war, it would be limited in its duration and destructive capacity. Why? They believed that any future war would simply replicate what occurred in the past, that famous line that generals prepared for the last war. That's what they're afraid of. And what liberalism was the limitations on the power of the monarch. Who's fighting World War I? The last vestiges of this dynastic monarchical system. In fact, when you look at the leaders of these nations, they're all relatives. They're cousins and uncles of one another. It's a family feud, not to make the joke of the TV show. It's a family feud. But this is what other wars have been. These political leaders believed that they would be victorious, that life would go on as before. Expectations that were totally wrong. And when the war did come, it was a war of choice. I know that some people will say it's a war of an accident, or some would say it's a war of necessity. No, it's a war of choice. So prior to World War I, there is a strong sense of isolationism. Not necessarily among the business people, not necessarily among the political leaders. The largest trading partner of the United States are the Europeans. We had loaned enormous amounts of money to them. They had loaned enormous amounts of money to us. Wilson expressed sympathy for the Allies. But it's the American economic ties to the Allies, commercially and financially, that made neutrality difficult. And so necessarily, one of the things we see, certainly at a political level, is an attempt to convince Americans of the need to enter this war. A whole range of new governments, agencies to manage the shift. Fuel Administration, Food Administration, War Industry Board. They're setting prices, they're allocating materials, standardization of goods. All of these things are occurring as a consequence of total war. Now, someone said these are emergency circumstances. If I look at how the war is financed, 2/3 comes from loans, 1/3 through taxes. Consequence of total war, it's just, I think last year the Germans paid off their last part of their reparation debt. You can finance debt for 50 or 100 years. Corporate profits swelled during World War I to $7 billion. And guess what? Workers benefit, full employment. But there's inflation. So you have rising costs in food, fuel, etc., etc. Because if you look at how women dressed in 1916 and 17, they're dressed up to here, they're all the way down to here. How can you work on machinery dressed that way? Women start cutting your hair, they called it a bob. And there's a whole consequence that flows from that. You saw the same thing in World War II. There was enormous cooperation between union and government, no strikes. One of the things that's fascinating in Europe is socialists who argue, the socialist parties in various countries said, forget about nationality, all workers in the world unite, now are organizing socialists in their country to fight socialists in the other country. During World War I, there was a Committee of Public Information that acted as a propaganda agency. One of the things this did was demonize Germany. People were spying on neighbors. I think we changed sauerkraut to another name. The English aristocracy who know as the Windsors were actually known as the Hanovers. We changed hamburger to Salisbury steak. The U.S. government tried to silence any who questioned the war. And this resulted in a massive violation of civil liberties. For example, there was the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. Under the Sedition Act, they couldn't even criticize the government. That which we know as the press today or the internet or blogs would have been criminal acts of these things. It bans what's called, and very broadly, anything that you wrote or distributed through the mail could be treasonous under the Espionage Act. And so the Supreme Court upholds these acts, and this will be the law for decades thereafter. The things that fascinate me about what happened as a result of World War I is the leading creditor nation in the world prior to World War I was England. In 4 years, it became the debtor nation. The nation that emerged as the most powerful economy and a major leading creditor nation in the world was the United States.
The World War I Historical Association, we study World War I. I've been to lots of seminars on this. And the only official World War I monument in the United States is the Liberty Memorial in Kansas City, Missouri, where we have our annual meeting next November. So if you're a history junkie, look it up on the internet, and then you're welcome to join us.